The Princess of Wales has agreed to Prince Charles's request for a divorce. Camilla and Parker Bowles, whose relationship with the Prince of Wales was confirmed last year, is to divorce.
The royal family stands as a symbol of tradition, stability, and continuity. But behind the ceremony and public spectacle lies a world of rivalry, betrayal, and personal conflict. Because where power, love, and ambition collide, conflict is never far behind.
And she said, I can't find my husband or Camilla.
For years, the world was told the story of two women locked in a bitter rivalry.
She was almost became a prisoner in her own home. She was vilified. She was hated.
But was the feud really as deep as many believed?
Well, these are the pictures of Di looking very sad.
Or has the truth been lost beneath decades of headlines, rumors, and speculation? On February 24th, 1981, Prince Charles announced his engagement to a shy 19-year-old nursery assistant, Diana Spencer. To the world, it looked like the beginning of a fairy tale. The heir to the throne had finally found his princess. They had first met in 1977, and to many observers, Diana seemed the perfect match for the future king. Young, aristocratic, and seemingly destined for royal life.
And what did you think then? What was your instant impression, both of you? What did you think about Lady Diana then?
Well, I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. And having great fun, and bouncy and full of life and everything. And I don't know what you thought of me. But...
Pretty amazing.
Hello, good morning. Well, the big day has arrived. In 4 hours' time, Charles Philip Arthur George Mountbatten Windsor marries Diana Frances Spencer, and Britain and the world will celebrate the wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Hundreds of millions would watch as Charles and Diana married at St. Paul's Cathedral. The spectacle was unlike anything seen before. Crowds packed the streets of London. Television audiences stretched across continents. The House of Windsor appeared to have secured its future. But behind the smiles, cracks were already beginning to show. Diana was young, inexperienced, and suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Charles, more than a decade older, was expected to balance royal duty with married life. The pressures were immense.
Well, I think after they got married and they went on their honeymoon, even then things were starting to unravel a bit, because I don't think it matched what Diana had expected.
Yet in public, the couple seemed unstoppable.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend it.
How do you like Balmoral as a place?
Lovely.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
I don't eat breakfast.
The birth of Prince William in 1982, followed by Prince Harry 2 years later, reinforced the image of a happy young family. But behind closed doors, the reality was becoming increasingly complicated.
I think after Harry was born, the relationship seriously broke down. It just hadn't worked out like both of them expected, and Diana had serious doubts, and so did Charles. But it was too late, and her sisters famously said, "But Dutch," which was her nickname, "your face is on the tea towels." And Charles's friends, his close friends, warned him, "This is not going to work, Charles. She's too young, she's too naive, and you're an imaginary prince. She doesn't know you at all." If you add that mix to the huge and unprecedented interest in the couple, well, especially in Diana, you can see it reach boiling point.
Around the world, Diana became a phenomenon. Crowds gathered wherever she went. Newspapers chronicled her every move. Her popularity eclipsed that of almost every other member of the royal family.
Diana as a person was about as normal as you're going to get. And the number of occasions that we would ever go on a public engagement, for most royals, it's shaking hands with people behind a metal barrier. It's sort of a hand comes across and hello, you get pushed back. With Diana it was different.
Sorry, I didn't see you
I
there.
wish you
Sorry.
that, darling.
Hello.
Wish you
You're hugging the
that.
lamb.
I'm happy with that. I'm having it all this side.
Well, Charles was so used to having all the attention on him, which it had been since he was born. He didn't like the idea that they walked down a street, say, when they were doing a royal engagement, and the crowd were calling, "Diana, Diana." So he felt surplus and didn't really know what to do with himself.
But as Diana's star rose, her marriage was becoming increasingly strained. By the mid-1980s, those closest to the couple began noticing the distance between them. Public appearances concealed private tensions. The fairy tale was beginning to unravel. And then, in 1986, rumors began circulating that Charles had rekindled a relationship from his past. The woman at the center of those rumors was not a stranger. She was someone Charles had known for years, someone who had never truly disappeared from his life. Her name was Camilla Parker Bowles. And to understand how one of the most infamous royal feuds in history began, we have to go back long before Diana entered the picture. The exact circumstances of Prince Charles and Camilla's first meeting remain disputed. Some accounts place it at a polo match in the early 1970s. Others suggest they were introduced through mutual friends on the aristocratic social circuit. Whatever the truth, the pair quickly became close.
Well, Charles was in love with Camilla from a very early age. When he was still in the Navy, he fell in love with Camilla. She was funny. She was a great rider. She's very, very attractive to both men and women because of her personality. She's got a wonderful personality. So I think she had a lot of ingredients that Charles really, really fell in love with, and he never really fell out of love with her. So it is a very romantic story.
A romance developed between the two, but the relationship would prove difficult to sustain. In 1973, Charles left Britain to serve with the Royal Navy. During his absence, Camilla became engaged to Andrew Parker Bowles. a cavalry officer with whom she had enjoyed a long and often on-off relationship. Later that year, they married. Charles returned home to find that the woman he had once hoped to marry had begun a new life without him.
I think Charles was very, very hurt when Camilla and Andrew got married, and he knew it was going to happen, but he just didn't want to be part of it. But he knew that probably there was nothing he could do about it.
Yet despite the end of their romance, Charles and Camilla never truly disappeared from one another's lives. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, they continued to move within the same social circles. They attended many of the same events, shared mutual friends, and remained a familiar presence in one another's lives. Meanwhile, their lives appeared to move in different directions. Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles started a family and would have 2 children. Charles continued to fulfill his royal duties, while pressure mounted for him to find a suitable bride.
Well, Camilla liked Diana when she first met her because I think she thought Diana wouldn't be a threat. Diana was so young and so naive, and Camilla thought that this is perfect for Charles, she's pliable. But of course Diana was not pliable at all. So I think Camilla completely misjudged that one.
To the public, it seemed a fresh start, but Camilla had not vanished from the picture. In later years, Diana would recall feeling uneasy about the closeness between Charles and his former girlfriend. One incident, in particular, stayed with her. Just weeks before the royal wedding, Diana reportedly discovered that Charles had commissioned a personal bracelet for Camilla. Engraved with the initials G and F, nicknames said to have been used by the pair, the gift left Diana deeply upset. It was an uncomfortable detail on the eve of what was supposed to be a fairy tale wedding. Why was the future king exchanging intimate gifts with another woman just before marrying Diana? At the time, few people outside royal circles paid much attention. Charles had married Diana, and Camilla remained in the background. Officially, she was simply an old friend.
Well, Camilla lived near Charles at Highgrove, and Charles used to see her on Sundays. And so when Diana drove back to London, to Kensington Palace, Charles would be out of the other end of the drive, driving off to Camilla's house, or she would be coming to Highgrove. Sundays are for Camilla.
But as the years passed, questions about the true nature of their relationship refused to go away. By the mid-1980s, those questions were no longer distant rumors. And by 1989, they were beginning to reach Diana directly. In 1989, Diana's public life was evolving. She was no longer simply a royal consort in waiting. She had become one of the most photographed women in the world. But behind the image, her marriage to Charles remained under strain. By the end of the 1980s, the rumors surrounding Charles and Camilla were no longer distant speculation. They had become something more persistent, harder to dismiss, harder to avoid, and eventually Diana decided to confront them.
What happened that Camilla's sister's 40th birthday in Richmond, and I was actually surprised that even Diana had agreed to go to this party, knowing full well that Camilla was going to be there. But anyway, she decided to go. Anyway, we left Kensington Palace and sat in the front. There wasn't a great deal of conversation on the back seat for obvious reasons, because, the Prince knew Camilla was going to be there. There he is with his wife. How difficult is this going to be? Anyway, we arrived at this house, and You know, this is one of many events that, you know, that stick in your mind for so many different reasons. And anyway, they went and I disappeared. And I disappeared to the kitchen, actually. It was not a bad place to go, have something to eat. Diana knew I'd be there somewhere. But anyway, about, I don't know, 40 minutes, an hour later, I heard my name being called, and it was her. And she said, I can't find my husband, or Camilla can.
It was a big party on probably on 3 or 4 floors, and she looked around, where's Charles, where's Charles? And then she realised that he must be downstairs on the lower level in the sort of basement area.
And they were sat on a sofa talking, and I didn't know what Diana was going to say next, but she literally went up to Camilla and said, "Stop treating me like an idiot. I know exactly what's going on," or words very close to that effect.
I think Diana was terrified. Camilla must have been completely taken aback.
And then Camilla said this phrase, which I'll never forget. She said, "Well, it's okay for you. You know, you've got 2 wonderful boys." And I could see the prince would be very uncomfortable in this situation, as indeed I was.
I mean, you don't expect that to happen. And Diana was shaking with fear and rage.
You know, soon thereafter, I think Diana had then given up any hope of a reconciliation. Because I think, to be honest, I think she firmly believed that something, you know, like a return to normality within her marriage could happen. I think she really held out hope that that might happen. But I think this meeting, I think, probably scotched it. I think she realized then that there's little or no chance of us returning to a normal married life. I thought the way that she dealt with it was incredibly strong, and yeah, I admired her for it, because what else can you do if under those circumstances? But I think it did change the course of events.
Diana's confrontation with Camilla brought no resolution. In the years that followed, Charles and Diana's marriage continued to unravel. Public appearances maintained the appearance of unity, but privately the distance between them was growing. For Diana, concerns about Camilla had become impossible to shake. And as the marriage deteriorated, she began to tell her side of the story. By 1992, a succession of revelations would expose the state of the royal marriage to the world. What had once been whispered behind palace walls was about to become front-page news. By 1992, the crisis at the heart of Charles and Diana's marriage could no longer be contained. It was a year so damaging to the royal family that Queen Elizabeth II would later describe it as her annus horribilis, her horrible year.
I sometimes wonder how future generations will judge the events of this tumultuous year.
The monarchy found itself under siege. 3 of the Queen's children's marriages were in difficulty or had collapsed. A devastating fire had torn through Windsor Castle. Day after day, damaging headlines dominated the newspapers. Public confidence in the royal family was beginning to waver. But at the centre of the storm were the Prince and Princess of Wales. In June 1992, an explosive new book pulled back the curtain on life behind palace walls. Diana. Her true story revealed allegations of bulimia, self-harm, suicide attempts, and a marriage in deep crisis. Most damagingly of all, it portrayed Camilla Parker Bowles as a central factor in the breakdown of Charles and Diana's relationship. The book's author was royal journalist Andrew Morton.
He's with me now in the studio. Your sources are pretty close to the princess. We're told that divorce is not an option, it is not in the frame. What if 2 years down the road the princess, for instance, falls in love with another man, or Prince Charles wants to marry another woman? It would be possible.
Absolutely.
The impact was immediate. For years, the public had been sold the image of a royal fairy tale. Now they were being shown a very different reality. The revelations dominated newspaper front pages and television bulletins, turning private grievances into a public spectacle.
When the serialisation of the Morton book appeared in the Sunday Times, it said, I think the front page was, Diana's 5 suicide bids for uncaring Charles. So, I mean, it was so explosive.
Well, these are the pictures of Di looking very sad. She's obviously a very sad day for them.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? I think that's the one.
Just 6 months later, on December 9th, 1992, Prime Minister John Major stood before the House of Commons and announced that the Prince and Princess of Wales had formally separated. The marriage was effectively over. Yet the most damaging revelation was still to come.
Joining me now in the studio is Andrew Morton, the author of Diana, Her True Story, which brought to the public's attention the state of the royal marriage. Mr. Morton, the palace said today that no third party is involved. Can that be right?
Ostensibly, no. Given the fact that the Princess of Wales believes that Prince Charles's friendship with another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles, has cast a long shadow over that marriage, must be considered when you look at the failure of this 11-year union.
So right after what the Queen called her annus horribilis came what we called the Charles and Camilla tapes. It was very intimate, and it was absolutely horrific, actually. And I think people thought, Charles can never be king. This is, he talks about how, what he would like to be doing to Camilla in a very intimate way, and it was horrible.
Buckingham Palace tonight declined to comment on the contents of the magazine. There's been no comment from Mrs. Parker Bowles. In the past, her husband has dismissed such allegations as rubbish.
It was really, really horrible, and it must have been the most embarrassing thing that could happen to anyone.
For years, the relationship between Charles and Camilla had been the subject of rumour and speculation. Now the public could hear the evidence for themselves. The affair was no longer a private matter. It had become a global scandal.
Camilla was in a very, very unpleasant situation. She almost became a prisoner in her own home. She was vilified.
Newspapers around the world dissected every line of the leaked conversations. Charles became the focus of ridicule, while Camilla found herself thrust into a level of public scrutiny she had never experienced before. At the same time, sympathy for Diana continued to grow. To many, she appeared to be the wronged party in a marriage that was rapidly falling apart. As public opinion increasingly swung in Diana's favour, Charles found himself losing control of the narrative. By 1994, the Prince of Wales was determined to change that. In an unprecedented move, Charles agreed to cooperate with an authorised biography by journalist Jonathan Dimbleby and a major television documentary designed to tell his side of the story. It was a remarkable gamble.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. Us both having tried.
It was the closest the prince had come to admitting adultery, and in a single moment, years of rumours appeared to be confirmed. But while Charles was attempting to explain himself on national television, Diana was preparing a response of her own, one that required no interview, no statement, and no words at all.
Well, the night that the interview came out, Diana was at the Serpentine Gallery, and she was wearing the most amazingly sexy dress, which she'd pulled out of her cupboard and thought, this is it. So she obviously knew, and she just looked amazing. And she called it her revenge dress. And I think she was delighted, actually, when that interview came out. I think she suddenly thought, oh, right, here you go now. It's your turn. And it made her look, you know, she looked so much better. It made her look the wronged wife, which, of course, she was.
In a single evening, the battle for public opinion had entered a new phase. Charles had offered an explanation. Diana had delivered a statement. Neither would be forgotten. And throughout it all, Camilla remained at the center of the story. But the most explosive chapter of all was still to come. Because next time, Diana would speak for herself.
Camilla Parker Bowles, whose relationship with the Prince of Wales was confirmed last year, is to divorce. Mrs. Parker Bowles and her husband issued a statement this morning saying they'd grown apart in recent years and had little of common interest left in their lives. The announcement immediately focused attention on Prince Charles, who's admitted to having 3 separate affairs with Mrs. Parker Bowles. The prince is separated but not divorced from the Princess of Wales. And a spokesman for the prince said this morning that there'd been no discussions with the princess about divorce.
Camilla's divorce was another milestone in a story that had already consumed the royal family for years. Yet while one marriage had come to an end, Charles and Diana remained trapped in limbo. Separated, but not divorced. Publicly united by duty, privately divided by years of resentment, mistrust, and public scandal. As speculation continued to surround her personal life, Diana increasingly focused her attention elsewhere. Through her charity work and public engagements, she was forging an identity beyond her role as the Princess of Wales.
Well, Diana took up unpopular, difficult causes. That's what really was the difference. And she wanted to go more into the areas of not sort of going and cutting ribbons at hospitals, but she wanted to actually be out in the field doing things. And that was her raison d'etre. And she was really excited about the future and what she realised that she had the power to change things.
Whether visiting hospitals, supporting homelessness charities, or comforting those affected by illness, Diana's ability to connect with people only strengthened her popularity. By the mid-1990s, she had become far more than a royal figure. She was a global phenomenon. Yet, even with her global stardom and charitable endeavours, one question continued to follow her wherever she went. What had really happened inside the royal marriage? And despite the headlines, the biographies, and the endless speculation, the public had never heard directly from Diana herself. That changed in November 1995. Sitting opposite BBC journalist Martin Bashir, the Princess of Wales was about to give the most candid interview of her life.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
After Panorama, the Queen realise that this couldn't go on, because it was taking up all the news. She was very concerned about the institution of the monarchy with all this scandal going on. She thought there's only one thing to do, and the Queen is head of the church, and the last thing she wants is a divorce.
The Princess of Wales has agreed to Prince Charles's request for a divorce. A spokeswoman for the Princess said that Diana will continue to be involved in all decisions relating to the couple's children, and she will continue to live at Kensington Palace. Buckingham Palace had no immediate reaction to the statement.
The divorce ended the marriage, but not the story around it. The attention didn't fade. It intensified. Diana became the target of an increasingly relentless press, with photographers tracking her every move. Every new relationship, holiday and public appearance became front-page news.
There's fresh controversy surrounding Princess Diana this lunchtime after newspaper reports linking her with Dodi Fayed, the son of the Harrods boss Mohammed Al Fayed. She's said to have joined the 40-year-old millionaire and a group of friends for a Mediterranean cruise last weekend. Once again, her judgments under scrutiny.
As the headlines multiplied, so too did questions about the direction her life was taking. And for the first time in her adult life, Diana was operating beyond the structures that had once managed both her public image and her personal security.
I left in 1993, a year following the separation from the Prince of Wales, so she was clearly down the track of moving out of royalty. I knew that. Not many people did, but she was about to leave. And this is quite interesting because I went back to Kensington Palace. She insisted I go back to see her, which I did. And it was like nothing had happened. You know, it was just like going that first day when I met her in Sandringham. The usual sort of joke-telling session started, you know, happy times, fun, laughter. It was really good. I mean, I was thinking, you know, maybe I shouldn't have gone, you know, maybe I might come back. And, but no. And then at the end she said, is there any piece of advice you could give me? And I said, look, you have to retain, you know, the yard's security for your own safety, and I urge you to do so. Which of course she didn't. Which ultimately, I firmly believe, led to her death in Paris in 1997.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times shall we remember her? In how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy. When with just a look or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her. They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
Diana's death changed everything. In the immediate aftermath, public grief was overwhelming. Millions mourned the Princess of Wales.
I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory.
But as tributes poured in from around the world, attention inevitably turned to the people who had shaped the final years of her life. And few figures attracted more scrutiny than Camilla Parker Bowles.
She was absolutely hated by everyone. I mean, actually, the Queen felt very sorry for her. She called her their much maligned woman, because you know they've known the Parker Bowleses all their life. So the Queen felt desperately sad for Camilla, and it was a very, very, very difficult time for her, especially after Diana died. I mean, then she was even more of a prisoner.
In the weeks and months that followed, Charles faced an extraordinary challenge. Not simply how to mourn the mother of his children, but how to navigate a future with Camilla in a country where her public image had been profoundly damaged. For a time, the relationship retreated from view. Yet despite years of scandal, public criticism, and intense media attention, Charles and Camilla remained together.
Well, Charles is a great believer that time is a healer, and he is, in essence, right. And he thought, if we take it very gently, we'll get it right, and people will accept Camilla because she's wonderful. And there's a lot of people that will never accept her. But it did take a long time, and they did it very gradually. Then they became under so much pressure for the first picture of them together. And they thought of all different ways of doing it. Maybe they just should release a picture of them together. Maybe they should arrange for them to be out somewhere and press would just happen to be there. But in the end, they decided to do it at Camilla's sister's birthday party at the Ritz.
Outside the Ritz, they're ready for one of the shots of the year. Charles and Camilla together at last. Tonight, it's expected the couple will leave a birthday party together, finally acknowledging in public a relationship that started back in the 70s.
If you asked any photographer which the picture they want to take, it's Prince Charles with Camilla Parker Bowles. It's the one great picture left to take.
How important is it not to miss the shot?
Oh, it's you can't afford to miss it. You know, you've got to get the two of them together, walking down those steps. If you get that, you're there.
Photographers waited patiently outside the Ritz Hotel, their cameras fixed on the entrance. The emergence of a new, though hardly unknown, royal couple was expected at any moment.
They obviously got the right to say it. I can't see that. There he is.
Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles seen together in public quite clearly, coming down the steps of the Ritz after the party for the 50th birthday party for Camilla's sister. No secret about their relationship now, none possible at all. The photograph that people have waited so long, the picture that people have waited so long to see. Quite brief really, out of the doors, down the steps, into the car and driving away. An absolute cascade of flashbulbs, only a few seconds, but the picture, the scene that says so much.
And with every public appearance, a question lingered. Had the country finally accepted Camilla Parker Bowles? Or would Diana's memory always stand between them?
They've waited long enough, but tonight they emerged as a couple soon to be wed. If you've been together this long, you've perhaps a right to demand a ring worth waiting for, and in this regard the royal family doesn't disappoint. Camilla sported a whopping diamond upon her finger, and she was clearly on a high.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much indeed.
Can I see a ring?
You can have a
A month after the engagement announcement, the two wed at Windsor Guildhall, in a quiet civil ceremony far removed from the grandeur traditionally associated with royal weddings. It was a deliberately understated affair, with only close family and a small circle of guests in attendance. For Camilla, it marked a formal entry into the royal fold, but not yet a transformation in public perception. In the years that followed, the image of the relationship gradually shifted. What had once been viewed through the lens of scandal and separation began to settle into something more accepted, even normalized, as the couple became a more visible, established presence within royal life.
Well, I think Camilla's repaired her reputation by just being very patient and just taking it very slowly. She didn't do too many royal engagements to begin with. She was always letting Prince Charles take the bow, if you like. He was always in front. But I think she's very much, we still feel that she is there for her husband.
Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the question of Camilla's position within the monarchy was finally resolved in full. In a statement issued in the years prior, the Queen had made her wishes clear, that Camilla should be known as Queen Consort when Charles came to the throne. A quiet but significant endorsement that helped settle years of institutional uncertainty. When the moment arrived, the transition was largely seamless in public terms, marked more by acceptance than the controversy that had once defined her image. And so the question of the feud remains, even now, difficult to define in absolute terms. What was once presented as a clear and enduring rivalry between two women appears, on closer reflection, to have been something more fragmented. As it was reinforced by headlines, repeated through coverage, and absorbed into public memory, it became a story that appeared definitive. There were moments of tension, undoubtedly, but whether they formed the enduring conflict so often portrayed, or were instead amplified into something larger, is far harder to define with clarity. What remains is not a simple answer, but a reminder of how easily perception can harden into narrative.